What's going on, everyone? Matic here, and today we're going over the 5 basic principles of fighting. So first thing we need to do is actually figure out kind of what a principle is when it comes to something. And the simplest explanation for a principle is that there
is more what you call guideline.
And because they are mostly guidelines, they are not hard set rules. Hard set rules means there's not a whole lot of flexibility. But since they are a principle or a guideline, they are specific enough that we can go back to look for, see if we're kind of doing things right or if we're in the right ballpark of something. But they're also vague enough for individual interpretation and nuance. So the 5 principles that we're going to talk about in order but also build on top of each other are distance, positioning, guard, techniques, and strategies. So the first principle they're going over is distance. So distance is anything from being how far away you are from someone to managing that distance. And you can start exploring this principle simply by seeing how long your limbs are. Whether it be facing straight to an object and reaching out and see where my fingertips touch, or where my flat fist touches, or even how close I have to be in order to put an elbow. Or if I turn all the way sideways, stretch myself as far as possible, and how far can just my toe touch? How much closer do I have to be for my foot or my shin or even for my knee to touch? So these are all things you can start doing without really knowing any techniques. You just have to put something out there and see if it touches. And then from there, if you can just barely touch anything, just wiggle a little bit forward. Now I have my fist on, but I can't really hit anything and cause damage. Yeah, it'll sting, yeah, it'll hurt, but no real damage. So anytime that when you start doing our 4th principle, which is our techniques, you always want to have just a little bit of give in the limb that you're hitting with so that it can then do its full extension to penetrate or go into the target. Now, moving straight from distancing, we have to figure out ways on how to change that distance. And that comes to our 2nd principle, positioning. Positioning is a single or combination of 3 types of movement. And that can be head movement, whether it's dodging simply out of the way, small techniques. Body movement, where you typically bend at the waist or you might bend at the knees to get a little bit of more movement. Or then moving with the feet, whether it to be evading a technique, getting into a better position or an angle for your target, or advancing forward or retreating, depending on the situation. Now, from positioning, we go right into a 3rd principle, which is our guard. Now, typically when people think of or hear the word guard, they mostly think of only hand position. And unfortunately, for most modern fighting systems or conventional and sport fighting systems, the classical guard position is this double hands up either by the temples, the cheeks, or close to the chin. And that's typically what they have. But that is generally within the specific context of the sport. It's either the rule sets or the equipment makes that particular guard the optimal guard to have for that activity. And this is essentially evidenced throughout history. There's all types of guards when it comes to combat systems. But because of that, you don't need to have one static type guard. If you want to have a good guard, that you should explore and experiment with different types of guards. There is the conventional basic one where you're protecting primarily your head, body slightly open. You can crunch down in order to block or shift out of the way. You have your more classic karate guard to where you're mostly protecting a high, you're protecting a low, and you're mostly protecting your center. And the most thing you have to worry about is things that come around to the sides, which can be countered with either actively blocking and parrying or using positioning to get out of the way. However, you can also use your body position to be part of your guard. You can have more of a forward type body position, a slightly more turned, or an even more turned, almost sideways position. These either open up or close available targets for your opponent to try to attack. So next thing going after that is our 4th principle, which honestly has been the majority of my channel thus far, is techniques. And techniques is essentially whatever those are. Now, most of the videos that I've done so far have been purely offensive techniques, so punching and kicking and stuff like that. is like, however, techniques also apply to your blocking, your parrying, and your deflection techniques, as well as your throwing and any type of ground game techniques as well. So essentially, techniques is anything that you can use to capitalize on your opponent, whether it be offensive or defensive, whether you're standing or you're on the ground or actively trying to get to the ground. Which then brings us to our final principle, which is strategies. Strategies are a combination of distancing and distance management, positioning properly with our opponent, using the correct guard at the right time, using the correct techniques for that positioning and for that guard and from that proper distance, and the strategies on when and how to use them within particular situations. A really good one is if you're someone who does use kicking techniques, if you are too close to your opponent, guess what? You're not going to be throwing kicks. So don't throw kicks, either throw hands, throw elbows, or throw knees. You can throw kicks from close up, but then you have to do body positioning in order to create that space and then throw that kick. If you are someone who primarily likes hand techniques, then you need to use proper distance management because they might like to use kicking techniques. Proper distance management, have the correct guard in order to counter their kicking techniques so you can move in close enough and then use your hands to counter their kicks. Another aspect is someone who typically likes to have their hands high. Guess what? You just start going low. If they have their hands typically low, you start going high. These are clear-cut examples, but these are the easiest examples. And funnily enough, these are examples that are seen all the time, but are usually hardly capitalized on when they should be. And it is hard because unfortunately, sometimes the more strategies and techniques that you get into your head, the harder it is to implement any of them. So sometimes the best idea is to keep it simple and pick 1 or 2, 3 techniques, build strategies off of those until you encounter something you haven't seen before, and then you see if you can work your techniques to develop another strategy to counter that situation. So I hope y'all enjoyed this quick little video about some very basic fighting principles that can help you in just about any situation as long as you have the proper training and drive in order to figure them out. I'm Matic, and I'll catch y'all later.